All right, guys, in this one, we're going to be talking about the remaining presence sliders, specifically the vibrance and the saturation sliders. These are the sliders that really impact the color in your, the overall color in your photo. And you kind of want to think of them similar to how texture and clarity work together, where saturation is the more impactful, punchier type effect, and vibrance is sort of the, little brother to saturation. It's a little bit more subtle, and it's actually the one that I use the most. I really tend to avoid using the saturation slider because it just makes things seem a little bit fake, a little bit overdone. You can see here, if we start to crank saturation up, it just really, makes the photo look, it just really makes the colors look a little bit unrealistic. Whereas vibrance, it's a lot more subtle. You can see if you bring up the vibrance a little bit, it doesn't push the tones around that much. Whereas saturation, if you look at the histogram, it really just sort of shifts those tones a little bit, lightens up the blues, shifts the reds and the yellows down, and just looks like a circus. So how I like to approach these in my landscapes, if they look a little bit like they could use a little bit more color, I really just add a little bit of vibrance, maybe something like this. You can see before or after. It's just a little bit of color pop. Whereas if I've added, say, a lot of dehaze to a photo, it's looking saturated already. I might actually bring the vibrance down a little bit to pull some of the color out. You can even, if it's looking extremely saturated, you might want to pull the saturation slider down a little bit. And actually, it's just sort of a quick way to do a black and white photo too. If you just crank the saturation all the way down, it desaturates the photo, pulls all of the color out of it so you can see what it looks like in a quick and dirty black and white. But for landscapes, if I feel like it needs a little bit more of a pop of color, I might bring up the vibrance just a touch. If it's already looking saturated, I might pull it down a little bit to pull some of that extra color out of it to make it look a little bit more realistic. Now that I think about it, this photo is actually looking a little bit darker, so maybe I want to just bring the exposure up just a little bit. So there we are with that one. This one is looking a little, let's see, a little bit darker. I might brighten it up just a little bit, and I might see what adding a little vibrance to the picture does. Let's see. Yeah, just a little bit of color here. I kind of like that. And even then, that might be a little bit too much. And again, if it's looking saturated enough already, you can just pull it back just a little bit to bring some of the color back out of it. But in this case, I think I want to bring vibrance up just a touch to about there. I think that looks good. This one's already looking pretty colorful. I don't think I would really do anything with this one. If you could bring maybe vibrance up a little bit. If you were doing something with selective color, maybe just turning everything black and white but leaving the eyes yellow, then maybe I might bring the vibrance up a little bit to really make that particular color pop. But in this case, I don't think this really needs these sliders at all, so I'm going to skip it for this photo. It's obviously a black and white, so when you shift your photo to black and white, it just disables these sliders because they're not really going to have any impact because there is no color in the photo. And with portraits, skin tones definitely want to avoid the saturation slider. You can see as you start to bring this up, that you crank it all the way up, they get that Oompa Loompa skin tone from the old Willy Wonka movie. So not really that pleasing. Vibrance, sometimes I can see maybe wanting to bring that up just a little bit. In this example, I might bring the vibrance up a little bit and then use the adjustment brush to make the color pop in the scarf a little bit. So we could use a targeted adjustment, which I'll get into later, on the scarf and really bring up the colors there. So maybe we'll go over that when we get to the adjustment brush. But for skin tones, you can give it a little bit of vibrance. Just bring a little bit of color back in the skin if it's looking a little desaturated. But I would not go any higher than that, really. And that is vibrance and saturation. Hopefully that makes sense. We've covered all of these present sliders. And again, with these, less is more, in my opinion. You can really, crank these up and get some really punchy, silly looks from your photos. And maybe that's the kind of thing that you're going for. I think black and whites can stand to have a little punchy clarity type look to it. That might look good. But for the most part, I tend to try to keep these as subtle as possible. And yeah, that's the present sliders. In the next series of videos, we're going to be getting into this toolbar up here. We're going to get into cropping next, and then into fixing things in photos, more targeted adjustments, and that kind of stuff. So if you like the video, please like it, subscribe it, leave comments, share it on social media. Greatly appreciated. Hope you guys are enjoying the series, and I will see you guys in the next one when we get into cropping. Cheers.